So the laboratory research we've done has been on mice, and we had no experience with mice with epilepsy, but we had a little bit of insight and some colleagues who worked on brain slices from mice. And so we started by studying the properties of neurons in brain slices. And we started by trying to figure out how do ketone bodies, which are these compounds that circulate in the blood at pretty high concentrations when somebody's on the diet, we started studying how do ketone bodies change the activity of these neurons. And we had an idea about how it might work, which is that there are these ion channels. Ion channels are signaling molecules in every neuron, and they control the electrical behavior of neurons. So epilepsy is a disorder of electrical activity. Basically, there's way too much electrical activity, kind of like an electrical storm during a seizure. And that's under control of ion channels. And there was one particular ion channel that we knew about that might make a plausible connection between metabolism, between the metabolic environment, because that's what changes when you're on one of these diets, and the activity of neurons. So this channel is called an ATP-sensitive potassium channel, and they are in lots of brain cells. So we looked for the idea that when we put ketone bodies onto brain slices, it might change how active these channels were. And we got some encouraging results that way. So we saw, that when you put ketone bodies on a brain slice, not immediately, but once the brain slice starts to use the ketone bodies as fuel, that you would see a change in nerve cell activity that was related to these ATP-sensitive potassium channels. So that was the beginning of this work, and to explore this more fully, we still needed to figure out exactly what ketone bodies were doing that made these channels more active, and also to figure out whether these channels, which we had proof of principle that they were participating in nerve cell activity in a brain slice, did they have anything to do with the seizure resistance of the diet? So we were very lucky to meet through friends. There were so many researchers on the street at Harvard Medical School. We were introduced to another researcher who studied brain cell metabolism and who found a mouse with a change in a single gene, and that change in that single gene makes brain cell metabolism change in sort of the way that brain cell metabolism changes on a ketogenic diet. And so we didn't have to put these mice on a diet. These mice were automatically altered in their metabolism. And so these mice, which have their altered metabolism with just this single gene change, these mice turn out to be really resistant to epileptic seizures. And so we were very excited by that, because this single gene change, it's much easier to track down the mechanism of how this single gene change works than to track down the mechanism how diet works. Diet is a very complex manipulation. It changes everything. It changes lots of things. And this gene just changes a few things, but it was able to produce similar effects to the ketogenic diet. So the exciting thing is, not only does it produce seizure resistance, but then we were able to actually test this idea that these ATP-sensitive potassium channels were involved in the seizure resistance. And the way we did that is we had a mouse without the KATP channels and a mouse that was seizure resistant. And we crossed them together for a few generations until we had a mouse that should be seizure resistant because of this gene, but didn't have any KATP channels. And it took about a year to do this experiment, because mouse breeding takes some time. And when we finally did it, we discovered, kind of to our surprise, that when you take away the KATP channels, the mice are no longer seizure resistant. So it supports the idea that change in metabolism works through these channels to produce seizure resistance. And that's something that we continue to work on. And we're very excited about that because we think we have a handle on one of the possible mechanisms by which ketogenic diet might produce resistance to epileptic seizures. I just want to say also that diet, as I said, is such a complex manipulation that I'd be surprised if it didn't work through more than one mechanism. So I think this mechanism that we're working on, we're very excited about, but I'm not going to be surprised if there are actually multiple separate mechanisms, all of which contribute to how the diet works so well.